All right, again, my name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace, and I'm here with co-producer Ernest Dunkley, and I'm pleased to say we're talking with Alex Steinberg of WBAI in New York, and Alex also is the chair pro tem of the National Pacifica Board of Directors. So I'm looking forward to having this discussion with you about Pacifica and about WBAI. There's so much, Alex, it's hard to know where to start. So you're a busy person, Alex. What can I say?
Yes, I am, and it's been kind of like nonstop since October. Actually, there were a lot of events that happened before we were shut down in October that I knew this was going to happen, and we were preparing for it. WBAI was gifted to the Pacifica Foundation by Lou Schweitzer. It had been previously a commercial station in New York, and Mr. Schweitzer had got pretty fed up with the stuff on the commercial radio and was looking for something different, something that had could reach an audience with intelligent programming and something not mainstream that they couldn't hear elsewhere. And he discovered the Pacifica Foundation, and Pacifica at that, I don't remember how many stations it had at that time, but it certainly had KPFA, the founding station in Berkeley, and I think the Los Angeles station was also there by then. The Washington station, the Houston station came a bit later. We are now 5 stations, including WBAI. Pacifica was founded by a radical pacifist named Lou Hill, who was incarcerated during World War II for his stand as a conscientious objector. And we have been providing an alternative viewpoint, alternative culture ever since. And we've also been under threat of being corporatized almost from the beginning. Lou Hill had to fight those battles back in the 1940s and 1950s. And guess what? We're still fighting them today.
Well, yes, I know that's true. That's right, yeah. But I need to say that the founder of WRFG here in Atlanta is Harlan Joy, and his wife, actually Barbara. They were up in New York for a while. And we're so impressed with Pacifica Radio. I mean, it's a community radio station owned and controlled basically by the people, right? And also, of course, the programming from WBAI. He was so impressed. So when he and Barbara came to Atlanta, they decided, no, we have to have a station like that in Atlanta. There was nothing like it. And we are the only community radio station here in Atlanta, as I guess you know, Alex. So thanks to WBAI for that, I need to say. It's a blessing. And all the work you've been doing all these many years.
Thank you for the station. Thank you for your contribution to the culture and education of Atlanta. It's a wonderful station. I listen to it occasionally.
Oh, wonderful. Well, good. Okay, so we do want to talk about what happened. I mean, okay, so you were talking about the 5 stations in the Pacifica Network. WBAI was shut down in October of 2019. And you had some assumption that this was probably going to happen, but why did you have that assumption? Some various sectors or individuals within the Pacifica Board decided to do this, right? But what made you think that was going to happen, Alex?
Well, I had since I was on the board of directors of Pacifica, I had a kind of an insider's view as to what was happening. And I noticed very shortly after we hired a new interim executive director, John Verneal, that a certain kind of disinformation campaign began against WBAI. They turned WBAI into a scapegoat, attempting to blame all of Pacifica's financial problems on WBAI. And once that started, and I could see that our executive director was enlisting all sorts of people into this disinformation campaign, I was anticipating some move to shut down or otherwise muzzle WBAI. And the reason for that is very simple. Pacifica has been in a serious financial crisis for quite a while, and this is part of a general problem that all broadcast radio is currently facing. We have to figure out how we're going to reach new audiences. As you know, the habits of listeners have changed because the technology and communications have changed.
Right.
Young people, for instance, don't listen very much to terrestrial radio. They do listen to podcasts. They listen over the internet and so on. Not that much terrestrial radio. And even car radios, they're more and more, the AM and FM stations are competing with satellite, Sirius XM, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a different playing field, and not to minimize that there have been management problems at Pacifica. There's no question of that as well. But we're not the only ones who had problems. iHeartRadio, the largest radio conglomerate in the country, they own something like 800 commercial radio stations. They just last month they announced a layoff of 1,000 people nationwide, and guess who were the primary victims of those layoffs? Not the large stations in the major cities, but the small stations in small communities and rural communities. These places.
Right.
It's the community radio stations that are being hit the most, and especially with new technology and looser regulations by the Federal Communications Commission that basically allows these radio conglomerates to do pretty much what they want. They're able essentially to automate radio. So you may think it's a local broadcast, but it's actually a broadcast that's being beamed in from thousands of miles away, and sometimes they try to fool you by having somebody get on for 30 seconds saying, "How is everybody today at Howard's Diner on Main Street?" Of course, this guy has never been on Howard's Diner on Main Street. They use things like that to give you the illusion that this is some kind of local programming, which it's not.
Yeah.
And more that's disappearing. Pacifica stations have maintained local programming, even as we also try to create some national programming. We were the ones, for instance, who launched Democracy Now!, as you know.
Right.
Which I believe just ended on your station.
It did. That's correct. That's right.
Yeah. And anyway, the battle has been essentially there's been a philosophical issue at the heart of this. The battle has been between those who think a corporate type model similar to what NPR stations have adopted, complete with accepting underwriting from major corporations and streamlining the programming so that local programming and these erratic, radical, edgy voices are eliminated. That's the model of some people. Primarily, these are some of the directors and their friends in the Bay Area in California. The other model is a model which maintains the radical traditions of Lou Hale, the founder of Pacifica, and Lou Schweitzer, the person who donated WBAI to Pacifica. And if you know some of the history of BAI, that we were very, very critical as one of the main voices opposing the Vietnam War, and we were the inventors through Bob Fass of freeform radio.
Wow, interesting.
There's a documentary about Bob Fass called Radio Unnameable. If you ever get a chance to see it, it's great, and it shows that in the '60s, WBAI was able, just by announcing an event was happening, thousands of people would turn up. This happened one time at Grand Central Station for a protest against the war, and another time people were told to go to JFK Airport, one of the terminals. Can you imagine hundreds and hundreds of people showed up at JFK Airport for a demonstration?
Yeah, fascinating. Wait, Ernest
anyway,
is shaking his head.
That's kind of our heritage.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I tell you what, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment. All right, again, my name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace, and I'm here with co-producer Ernest Dunkley, and I'm pleased to say we're talking with Alex Steinberg of WBAI in New York, and Alex also is the chair pro tem of the National Pacifica Board of Directors. And Alex, before before I ask you some more questions about all this, Ernest, do you remember this about WBAI? Do you remember that?
I remember it very clearly because BAI was the only hope really for radio at that time in New York.
So, Alex, I want you to know he was living in New York then, too. So go.
Oh, yeah. And very close to the airport also.
Yeah.
The racism in New York was really unbelievable. When people speak of New York as being in the North and very fair and all of that, it isn't. I think things may be a little better in the South because there's no cover-up about whatever there is going on.
Yeah.
You know, people work at it. But in New York at that time, it was terrible. And right about that time, just a little after that, was when I was introduced into television news gathering because there were no blacks or Latinos, except maybe down around Miami, where there were Cubans coming in at that time. But thanks to BAI, it really opened up radio for us.
Okay.
It really did.
All right. Yeah. That's great. So this history needs to be told, Alex.
Yeah. Very important.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I listened to BAI for years. I mean, my dial never moved from that station for the longest time.
So what were you saying, Alex?
Yeah, and no, I'm also proud to say that today WBAI has probably the most diverse group of staff, and that's both paid and unpaid staff of any radio station, certainly in the New York area.
You know, one of the things as far as WBAI is concerned, I know there have been changes over the years, of course, but this is a challenge that you all face in New York because you have one of the most valued antennas, right? Is that correct?
Well, okay, here's the nub of the problem. Okay, so I was explaining how there has been a financial problems at Pacifica, and then there was this disinformation campaign began, blaming all the financial problems on WBAI. And the bottom line was that these people had their radar set on the signal because the WBAI signal is by far the most valuable of any of the signals in the Pacifica network. For one thing, it's in the commercial band. It's right in the middle of the dial, 99.5. And were we to sell that signal, I've heard lots of estimates. At one time it was much more, but even in today's depressed market, it would probably go anywhere between $20 and $50 million.
Oh, my goodness.
Your guess
Right.
is as good as mine where it would be, but something in that range.
Wow.
So a lot of people at other stations that were feeling a financial pinch were looking at that and saying, this could solve our problems. We'd have a pot of money. Now, they didn't come out openly and say that, or at least not very recently, although in previous years and even as early as 2018, they were saying exactly that. There was a document being circulated around the network called Plan B, which was written by one of the architects of a bylaw proposal that's now being circulated in Pacifica. I'm not going to get into that right now, but that document called for the dismantling of the Pacifica network into individual stations, and to give it a financial push, it called for the sale or swap of one of the signals, and the only signal that's ever been considered is BAI, although sometimes they've also considered the Washington, D.C. station as one of their victims. So perhaps you want to get to the dramatic events that
so let's along that line. Yeah, let's move forward and talk about what happened in October last year. So, and you were expecting this, but probably not in the way it occurred, I'm assuming. But at any rate, so what happened in October to WBAI, Alex?
What I was expecting some kind of an attempt to either shut down BAI or turn it into what we call a repeater station. A repeater station is a station that's fully automated. There's no real staff. It's just piped in programming from elsewhere.
Right.
But I wasn't expecting that to happen without the concurrence of the Pacifica National Board. But what happened was our interim executive director, John Verneal, decided to go ahead, not only without the approval of the board, but without even notifying.
Wow.
So we didn't know about it. But on the morning of October 7th, which was a Monday, I got a call in the early morning from our general manager, Bertrand Reimer, saying that he just got an email that he was fired, and he's hearing that from other staff members, they got the same email that the whole staff was fired, and then he heard that there's some kind of something going on at our studio, that people came in there and threw everybody out. Anyway, so we all went down to the studio. By the time I got there, I tried to knock on the door to get in. I was refused entry, even though I am a director of Pacifica and I am entitled to have entry anywhere in Pacifica's premises. And the only people I saw were these two burly security guards. And I saw some of our staff people outside. They told me that they had been unceremoniously thrown out of the studio.
Wow.
And our landlord was told, you better get yourself a new tenant.
My goodness.
And what they did was they dismantled all the microphones and other equipment. They locked them up somewhere. And just symbolically, we had in our hallway these historic photographs, historic samples of the WBAI folio, which was a printed program that we used to distribute. It goes back like 40 or 50 years, and we had historic issues under glass in our hallway. For some reason, one of the directors who came to shut us down took all those photographs down. It was kind of like a symbolic statement saying,
wow,
you're no more, and we don't care about your history, and screw you. So that's kind of what happened. The people, the staff people who were there were kind of in a state of shock. And
you all were in the middle of a fund drive when that happened as well, right?
And we were in the first week. We had just finished the first week of our fund drive, which had been going very successfully, and they shut us down.
Wow.
It's kind of amazing. And they used the excuse that we were financially indigent and could not pay our bills. Well, of course, we certainly couldn't pay our bills after they shut us down because we had no way to raise money at all. They not only shut down our studio, they got into the tower where we broadcast from at 4 Times Square, and they locked us out of there, and that's when they started piping in this, I don't know how to describe it. It was something, they called it Pacifica Across America, and it was this sort of banal programming from California that I don't know who listened to it. I actually tried to listen to it for a few minutes, and it was beyond, it was beyond my level of toleration after 5 minutes.
Right. Oh my goodness. Oh dear.
Anyway, what we did was, thanks to our attorney, Arthur Schwartz, and Arthur was at that time just an attorney, a local attorney who has a program on WBAI about local politics. He's also involved in local politics in New York. And he heard about it, and he said, no, we got to do something about this. And somehow he went before a judge after hours, after 5 p.m. when the courts are shut down. That day, the day this happened? That day, that very day, he dragged the judge out of bed. They met told me they met in the lobby of the judge's apartment to argue this case, and he got a temporary restraining order. And,
well, what did that mean, a temporary restraining order on who was
on John Verneal?
I see. Because there, let me just.
That was the people who came were John Verneal, our interim executive director, 2 directors, both from Houston,
right?
Bill Crozier and Adrian Laviolette, a staff engineer from Washington, and 2 security guards. They put 2 security guards with them. They also got a locksmith to change all the locks so we couldn't get in. Anyway, so we got this TRO, and the TRO ordered them to reinstate the status quo before they broke in. But first of all, they ignored the TRO, and a day or two later, the chronology gets kind of confusing after a while, but it was a couple of days later, I think, they appealed the TRO, the temporary restraining order, and they got the judge heard the appeal, vacated most of it. The only part he maintained was that Pacifica had to continue to pay staff.
Oh, okay.
But as far as the shutdown of the station, he allowed that to continue. However, in the meantime, we were able to get back into the studio because since we didn't actually have a lease, our landlord, who was sympathetic to us, got a locksmith to change all the locks again, and we came back. Of course, we still couldn't broadcast, but at least we had a studio, and at least we were able to watch the equipment so that it couldn't be taken out, because it was a foregone conclusion that the equipment that they locked up would have been removed the next day or so, and that would have been that, and it would have really been impossible to get back on the air in any time. Anyway, so from there, they got the temporary restraining order. Then we went, and they got most of that vacated. We went back to court, and there was a whole thing that went on. They tried to take us out of New York State Supreme Court because they thought that was too favorable to us. So they tried to get the federal court, to hear the case. Okay, they claimed this was an FCC issue, which it wasn't. We weren't contesting the ownership of the license or anything like that. We were simply contesting the legality of shutting down WBAI without board authorization.
So what happened then?
Anyway,
so go ahead. Sorry.
Well, okay. A lot of things were going on at that time. There were meetings were organized. There was a press conference in front of City Hall that I managed to speak at. Many other people spoke at. The borough president of Brooklyn came down and gave us his support. Our studio, by the way, is in Brooklyn.
Right.
Anyway, when we finally got the hearing in federal court, we argued that the case doesn't belong in federal court, and the judge agreed with us, and he sent the case back to New York State Court, and so we went back to New York State Court, and finally there were several hearings, but finally on November 5th, in front of Judge Melissa Crane, she gave us everything we wanted. She ordered John Verneal and Pacifica staff to reopen a WBAI. And I should add that while this was all going on, there were all sorts of meetings on the Pacifica National Board. And the people who were behind this takeover of WBAI, realizing that they had really no legal authority to do this, were desperate to get some kind of retroactive ratification for their actions. So what they did was they held a meeting on October 12th in which they got their ratification, but they only did that because they disenfranchised 5 people from participating in the vote.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. So we're talking here about the National Pacifica Board, is that correct? That's what you're talking about?
The National Pacifica Board.
Yeah.
None of the 4 WBAI directors were allowed to vote.
Wow. Well, but
one other director was not allowed to vote.
Before we go on further, I just want our listeners to know that you are listening to WRFG Atlanta 89.3 FM. The program is Just Peace, and my name is Heather Gray. I'm here with co-producer Ernest Dunkley, and we're talking with Alex Steinberg about the how do you call this? The tragic incident that took place at WBAI in October of this past year. But I mean, the struggle has been ongoing. So they got the vote that they wanted, but they didn't allow certain board members to vote. I mean, how could that be legal?
Well, it wasn't legal. And
yeah. Okay.
The judge ruled that it was.
Okay.
Legal
Yeah. Okay.
Afterwards, and she said in her ruling specifically that the board at that time disenfranchised. She actually used that word, that we were disenfranchised. and that's absolutely correct. Anyway, we had an emergency meeting the next day, October 13th, in which the directors who participated were allowed to vote, and by that time we had a majority on the board that were opposing this action, and we authorized the reopening of WBAI. We suspended Mr. Verneal as interim executive director. We removed the two officers of the board who were supporters of this coup. This action by a majority of the board was, again, ignored by Mr. Verneal and his supporters. They were acting as if they were still in charge of everything.
Really?
And they continued, they continued to do so until we got the court order on November 5th. And even after we got the court order, they still continued to, this is what's astonishing, they still continued to do so. They still continued to engage a legal firm in the name of Pacifica, although we had the board majority on our side by that point, so we were Pacifica, not them. But they were engaging this law firm to argue against us.
So they completely sidestepped the democratic process as far as the board of directors was concerned and Pacifica bylaws were concerned, all of that, right? I mean, it's just remarkable, really.
They were hijacking the station.
Yeah.
They were what? They were hijacking. No,
It's
absolutely.
hijack,
In
yeah.
every conceivable way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not only that they were hijacking the democratic process, they were also, what they were doing was blatantly illegal.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess they figured they can just get away with it. Finally, by the end of November, we were able to regain control of the network.
What do you mean regain
that point,
control? What do you mean, on the board of directors or what? What do you mean by that?
I mean in the operationally, because even after the court order on November 5th, Pacifica staff continued to take orders from Mr. Verneal.
I see.
It took even though we suspended him, it took another 2 weeks or so before it sunk in that the court order meant exactly what it said.
Wow.
And
wow.
And we went on to fire with cause Mr. Verneal for his actions. We also dismissed the legal counsel for Pacifica, who was then engaged in what we felt was some very unethical behavior. I won't go into that any further.
Okay.
And we ordered a restoration of WBAI. It took us at least a good month before all our services were restored, and I'm talking about not only the studio and the tower, but our website, our bank accounts, the call center that we use to answer phone calls during fund drives. All these things had to be addressed, and it was quite exhausting for WBI management and staff.
I'm sure.
But we finally got back on the air. We got back on the air November 7th around midnight. I was in the new master studio when we did that. It was a very, very inspiring moment.
My goodness.
And anyway, those are kind of like that's what happened. Now, why it happened, the historical background, and the political meaning of it all is a whole other story that you may want to get into. But
yeah, why don't we get into that?
Definitely.
Both Ernest and I are interested, right, Ernest?
Realistically, I mean, Pacifica is the only really real station left in America.
Yeah,
after
right.
Fashion. Everything is owned by large conglomerates.
Yeah, right.
And
well, there are community radio stations like WRFG.
That's right.
And other community radio stations, but yeah.
Well, there are all our affiliates.
Yeah, and then we're affiliated to Pacifica, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's no one else.
No, it's true. I completely agree. Absolutely. So let's get into what you were saying, though. I mean, the thing that before we do that, though, Alex, I must say, these guys in California, in the Berkeley area, they planned this well, didn't they?
And what was their backup? I mean, there had to be someone behind them.
Yeah, they did. They did indeed. This was very well planned. It was laid out quite a while in advance.
Yeah, I mean, even with the locksmith, right? That's something. Go ahead.
Even with the locksmith, they anticipated all this. Certain staff members were all of a sudden promoted so that they had control over WBAI technical facilities, even though they had no physical connection to WBAI.
Right.
So this was I guess you could say a very professional operation.
Yeah.
And how to shut down a community radio station
and get away with it.
And get away with it, right. Well, they ultimately didn't.
They thought they could get away with it, but they really had it.
But what, Ernest?
They really had it planned so that they really thought they were going to get away with it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, really. So let's go to what you were mentioning, though, Alex, about Pacifica. Go ahead.
Well, I believe the larger picture is the increased corporatization and monopolization of communications and media technology, and of course that's very obvious with the rise of these mega internet corporations like Google and Facebook, Twitter.
Right.
But it also affects, of course, the more traditional media like radio and television. You see consolidation all over the place. T-Mobile and Sprint are merging. All this stuff is going on. Anyway, so there has been a movement to corporatize all the different community stations, and many of them have just shut. They weren't even corporatized; they were just shut down. There's less and less regional community stations throughout the country, just as there are less and less local newspapers.
That's right.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
A lot of small cities no longer have a newspaper, whether printed or online.
Right.
And in many rural communities, people, this is a life or death thing for them to rely on local news. It's their emergency service in many cases in these rural communities.
And it makes them a community. It pulls them together. It allows them to communicate. It's so very
exactly.
That's true.
And it's a political move too. Mm-hmm. Because who controls it?
So within Pacifica, this has taken the form over the years of various proposals to centralize operations, and right now it's taking the form of an attempt to remove our democratic governance process. The first blow for that was the attempted shutdown of BAI, but we're fighting on another front currently, and that's an attempt to rewrite our bylaws. There's a court action going on right now that's forcing us to hold a referendum, and the referendum will decide whether we maintain our current democratic governance process or will we be turned into a self-selecting board of directors like characterizes most NPR stations, in which there's really no local input as far as programming or major decisions on the local level. Currently, our Pacifica stations have both input on a local level through local station boards and democratically elected people serving on the national board, and we have several people from each station on the national board so that we get a diverse view of opinion.
Yeah, it's wonderful, really, from throughout the country, really. So that's really special. Yeah.
We're finding that battle is like Chapter 2, sort of the sequel of the shutdown of WBAI. But in fact, we could discuss that on another occasion. But the importance of the fact that we were able to restore WBAI, and the only reason we did it was because we had so much support, not only in New York, but throughout the country. Many listeners and staff throughout the country rallied to support us.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And I was getting interviewed all over the place.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Just because I happened to be the pro tem chair of the board that was defending WBAI at the time. I even had somebody call me from Manitoba, Canada, and interviewed me on some local community station there, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. right.
Yeah. So anyway, we were very happy, of course, to be back on the air, but the struggle
continues.
We're under no illusion that the struggle is over, and this battle between the forces who want to corporatize and centralize our operations and finance themselves at the expense of one of our stations, namely WBAI, and those who want to maintain a radical voice. I think it's sort of a mirror image of the kind of battle that's taking place politically throughout this country between the forces who want to present an alternative not only to Trump but to all the enablers of social inequality and imperialism that populate both of our major political parties,
Mm-hmm.
and those who are more or less okay with the status quo. That's kind of what's, it would be strange if there was no reflection of the larger political situation within Pacifica and within these radio networks.
Be a little bit more specific
that
about that. What are you meaning by that?
I think the forces that want to centralize Pacifica are forces that are more or less, they don't really want a truly radical alternative voice
Mm-hmm.
on the radio. They want something that they could call, quote, progressive, but that does not make prosperous middle class people feel too uncomfortable.
Right.
That's true. That's what that's the problem.
That is definitely the problem. Yeah, I agree with that, Alex. Yeah, right.
America today, yes.
Yeah, right.
So that's kind of the issue we're facing. And
Yeah.
I have nothing against prosperous middle class people who wish to be progressive. That's fine, but we also need a voice for those who are not prosperous and not middle class, who are at the bottom of the economic ladder, who are discriminated against racially and many other ways.
Absolutely.
And those voices need to be heard, and we have many such voices on WBAI and the other Pacifica stations.
Well, on that note,
Washington, DC.
I'm sorry, Alex, I apologize. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back to that in just a moment, okay? All right, again, my name is Heather Gray. The program is Just Peace. I'm here with co-producer Ernest Dunkley, and I'm pleased to say we're talking with Alex Steinberg, who is with WBAI in New York and also serves on the National Pacifica Board as the chair pro tem. So, thank you, Alex. Our time has gone so quickly. I was interrupting you when you were talking about the importance of diversity by class, by race, by culture, and so forth, that Pacifica Radio and actually community radio stations around the country really offer to wherever they're located, which is a blessing in countless ways. But what else were you going to say about that?
Well, there's always in American politics. There's always, whenever somebody speaks out too radically, and God forbid they should speak out against capitalism, there's always
I know, right?
This person is beyond the pale.
Yeah, right.
We've seen that, for instance, in the Bernie Sanders candidacy or the Tulsi Gabbard candidacy in the current primaries going on in the Democratic Party. We see this frenzied panic by the Democratic Party establishment to put anybody but somebody who talks about socialism as the candidate. You can't have that. Well, it's that kind of reaction that we're seeing within Pacifica against the radical spirit of Lou Hill and others who founded this network. They don't like the fact that we stand up not only against the emerging authoritarianism and proto-fascism of the Trump administration, but all the phonies of the Democratic Party who have sold out the working class. And just to give an example, we had a program on KPFA, that's our sister station in Berkeley, that was devoted to the working class called Weekly Worker, that was recently terminated. And the reason, the person who produces that program, was a vigorous critic of the management of that station, and some of the management of that station and the staff at that station have been at the hub of this movement to muzzle Pacifica and turn it into a kind of an NPR light type of operation.
Wow.
I can say a lot more. I can speak a lot more freely on your station than I can on any Pacifica station at the moment, because we are, believe it or not, under court order to, shall we say, allow equal time for the views of those who will corporatize us, as well as the views of those who oppose the corporation of Pacifica. So
wow.
I'm very happy to be on your station.
Oh, well, thank you, Alex. We're happy to have you on the air. I always say, as far as socialism or capitalism is concerned, that if there was ever a war that was successful in the world, it has to be the Cold War, because it's stymied so much of this discussion, not just here in the United States, but in so many other areas of the world, which is just crazy.
Yeah, but the fascinating thing is that it's returned. Now we have this an unbelievable situation now where 40% of people that are polled have a favorable view of socialism in America, and that's astounding. We have never seen anything like that, at least since 1912, when the Socialist Party ran Eugene V. Debs, and he got over 900,000 votes.
Yeah. Well, I need to say that one of my friends, one of the people that we've interviewed on Just Peace in the past, is Richard Wolff, the Marxist economist Richard Wolff, and he said that when in New York, when they had the Occupy movement in New York, he said, it was a huge awakening for so many people all over the country, because they realized the 1% versus the 99%, that there were huge inappropriate inequities in the United States. And he said now people are just flocking to his lectures, which is a good thing, all over the country, actually. So that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, and guess which radio station was down at Occupy Wall Street every day?
It was WBAI, right?
That's right.
Covering it live.
That's
Absolutely.
Right.
We were down there with Cornel West and Chris Hedges and other people. We had broadcasts from right there from Zuccotti Park.
That's great. That's wonderful. Yeah. So, and that would have been broadcast actually all over the country as well, right?
And there's no other alternative.
No, it's true. There's not.
There's no
there
other
really
alternative,
isn't. No,
and
it's
that's
true.
frightening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, because I can remember in New York when there was at least 15 newspapers every morning from different ethnic groups and organizations.
And you're just not seeing that now.
There's no information.
Yeah,
There's
right.
no counter information.
Yeah, that's
well. We have the New York Times and two tabloids.
Or the Daily News.
That's
yes.
it.
the New York Times
Daily
and the New
News,
York Daily News. Okay.
And the Post.
And the Post, yes, the Post.
The difference, and the Daily News and the Post are both very right wing, but one of them is right wing pro-Trump, and the other one is right wing against Trump.
Well, I tell you what, Alex, our time has just gone so quickly. We only have just a couple of minutes left here, but so we're gonna get you back on the air, right, Ernest?
Got to.
We're going to get you back on to get an update. But I appreciate also your comment at the very beginning of the show where you're saying, a lot of these things, because of the changes, the issues as far as media is concerned, because of the changes in technology and so forth, that we really need to explore ways to be diverse in terms of the information and what is possible to offer the variety of communities and cultures in the United States. So that's what you said at the beginning, something along that line, right? I think we should have that discussion. So
absolutely.
So put that on the agenda, Alex.
And by the way, Heather, I'd like to add, although you didn't say it, that you are also a member of the Pacifica National Board.
Yes, thank you.
As a representative of the affiliates for
right.
2020, although because of a court order, we're not allowed to seat you yet.
Yeah, right.
Anyway,
all these strange things.
That's a whole other subject.
Well, for future reference. All right, Alex Steinberg, I want to thank you so much for sharing all this with us. I just so appreciate it. So, and I look forward to having another discussion with you as well.
Absolutely.
All
Thank you,
right.
Heather.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Ernest.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care now. Thanks.